JPMorgan just rolled out a huge initiative, $350 million investment in the future of work. What have you seen happening without this investment that you think makes it so necessary now?
So if you look at America, we've grown at 20% the last 10 years. It should have been 40. We've identified one of the reasons is that kids aren't getting the education they need to get a job. And I'm talking about a real job. It could be out of high school, it could be out of community college, it could be out of college. It's probably been holding America back, I'd say possibly substantially, which is why you have 7 million open jobs and slightly less than that unemployed. So what we've seen is at the local level, and you were with us in Detroit,
yep,
that if you actually at the local level work with the local companies, like in Detroit that need machine tools or welders, the whole country needs automotive or nursing or something like that. But done right, you create kids jobs, it creates dignity. It's that first job, that first rung on the ladder. So we just think it's a critical thing to do.
Well, let's just hang on that word dignity for a moment. I mean, I couldn't agree more. People want to work and they want to enjoy their job. But has America forgotten about, whether it's corporate America that insists, many of them, on these 4-year college degrees, the government, about the importance of the dignity of work and a path that doesn't necessarily mean an Ivy League or any 4-year college degree?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So early, my grandparents didn't get a high school degree, and they came in, they did dishes like everybody else, and then kind of moved on up. And dignity, work is dignity. Dignity creates a household, better social outcomes, household formation, et cetera. And we did kind of go too far to this, you got to get a college degree. So 70% of Americans don't. That's true, by the way, in Switzerland, Germany, France. 30% go on, but the 70 who don't, they need jobs. They need the skills, whether it's the community college level, the apprenticeship level. We know what works. Apprenticeship, Switzerland and Germany do apprenticeship programs. These kids graduate at 12 grade years old with certifications. Unemployment among 17 to 24 is like 3%. In France, it's like 20%. And so we know what works. We just have to implement it at the local level with community organizations and governments who want to kind of get on board.
So, I mean, there's only so much even a really wealthy institution like JPMorgan can do. What about the government's onus in all this? You've got a lot of 2020 candidates talking about fighting over whether we should have 4-year college free for all. I assume you're in the camp that doesn't think America can afford that, but can America afford something?
America can afford almost whatever it wants. The question you have to say to yourself is what actually works. You know, slogans are not policy. And so we actually know it works. And I'm in favor of getting more kids college degrees, but not if they get there and they don't get a job. So you also mentioned, like, we are eliminating jobs where it says college degree required, where it should not be required. And you know, again, the kids, they can still go to college. So we've trained here in New York City, 35 kids at a Gutman community college, all jobs as tellers, $35,000 a year, full medical, pension, et cetera. And look, some may go on, some may go to college, some may just move up the ladder here. But we think they'll actually be happier because a college degree required. I'm not sure a lot of college degrees, kids with college degrees want to actually become a teller. That's probably just a way station. So,
did JPMorgan ever make that mistake in terms of sort of the job description saying 4-year college degree when you didn't need it?
Yeah, we've been asking, and our head of HR has removed it from a lot of jobs. But even where it's removed,
Yeah.
my guess is the bureaucracy locally can easily say, well, it's easier screen to say jobs required, and we should eliminate that. And so we need a lot to do to get the system that gets kids livelihoods out of high schools, community college, and colleges. It hasn't done very well, particularly in inner cities. You know, so for you and I, it worked pretty well for our kids.
Yeah.
You have little kids, but it'll work pretty well. But you go around the country, it simply doesn't work well. It's one of the reasons you have legitimate anger. Where's the opportunity that kids used to have? And it's not quite what it was.
You also are tying this announcement about the future of work to the inmate population here, the prison system, what's going on with criminal justice in this country. What do you think this can do to actually reduce recidivism and reincarceration rates?
And so we have 20 million ex-felons here. That number is 6 times as a percent of the population that Canada has. And a lot of those people probably never should have been felons, or they've paid their price and their right to return and try. I actually met with some ex-felons in Chicago. They've got families, they've got kids, they can't get credit, they can't get a home, they struggle to get a job, and they deserve a second chance. So one of the things we're trying here is we do hire ex-felons, but in a lot of ways in our industry, the regulatory rules that make it very hard. And we actually went to the regulators, and I applaud them. They've changed the rules. So we can give people a chance to come back with a job, household formation, dignity. And the people who are experts in this tell you a lot of the ex-felons they hire are the most loyal, hardworking. They don't want to go back. They just want that second chance. So I think all of us in America should look at that and figure out a way to help people have a second chance.
I was just in Rikers Island. I saw this among female inmates, most of whom are mothers there. Are you saying, Jamie, you want to hire more convicted felons at
Yes.
JPMorgan?
Yeah, and we're going to. And we're going to develop specific programs for specific jobs. These are not necessarily violent, lifelong criminals. These are people who, made a mistake when they were young. And I told my friends, you made a lot of mistakes when you were young too. You just didn't get caught.
And a lot of them are drug offenses.
Yeah, and that was probably the biggest mistake of all.
What do you mean?
That we shouldn't have criminalized every single kind of activity, and even there's 1, 2, and 3, and look at specific cases. So if you dig into it, it was just unfair, and it becomes, like I said, even more unfair when you get out. I mean, you sit down with ex-felons about getting a place to live, getting a job, getting the training for a job, getting credit, getting a mortgage. And so we should understand that and come up with programs that make returning citizens much happier, much productive, and it would be good for society.
So that comes to the issue of a living wage. I mean, one of the mothers I just visited in Rikers Island, she's not even 40 years old. She has been there, she's been in prison 35 times. I couldn't believe the number. I had to check the court records. Part of this is the inability to get a job to support your children when you're out, and this cycle. So let's talk about what you think a living wage is in this country. And of course it varies city by city.
So I think if you look, this is a legitimate complaint. I'm not sure most Americans appreciate 40% of Americans make $15 an hour or less. 15% make minimum wage. If you go back 30 or 40 years, minimum wage or close to it used to be kind of a living wage, where if you move up the ladder in a factory or some low-skilled job, but if you move up, you work hard, you can afford a house, a car, a family, and it's probably not true anymore. So there are two parts to that. I mean, we have to have a growth strategy for the economy. We also have a strategy to get those people skills they need. Like I said, there are 7 million open jobs, but you need skills. It could be nursing, automotive, welding, coding, or something like that, so people have a chance. Another thing which I'm very supportive of is this earned income tax credit. So if you have that job making $7 an hour and you're a single mother with 2 children, you can earn an extra $6,000, which is pretty good. So the $14,000 a year becomes $20,000, but it may not be enough.
But
so if we have to enhance that a little bit and also provide it maybe to fathers who are getting out of the job too, those living wages will create dignity and better social outcomes, will be good for all of America.
Look, the earned income tax credit and changes to that is what Warren Buffett says is the number one thing that could be done as well. On a living wage, JPMorgan recently raised their wages across the board. I think you said the lowest wage is $15 or $16 an hour?
In the major cities it's 16.5 with medical. I think in New York it's 18, which is like $36,000. By the way, this EITC, Warren Buffett, Paul Ryan, the Democrats, all think this kind of thing is a very good thing to do, to create people wanting to work, and when they do, to give them the job they can afford more, they can take care of a family, and like I said, far better social outcomes when that happens.
So it sounds like you're supportive of a $15.
I think if you raise the minimum wage, it becomes a bit of an issue. I think the EITCs are more economically efficient to do it. Obviously, it'll cost the government money, and someone's got to pay for that. But if it was done right, I think it would be a more efficient way to create jobs.
What about a universal basic income? More chatter about that.
Well, I think, again, you have to really study it. If you have programs for people who aren't working, for the sick, the poor, the old, and we have some called Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, et cetera, and then you have programs for people at the low end who are working, you're getting pretty close to that. But whatever you do, you should design these well to be efficient. And like I said, I think it's very important to acknowledge what's working, what's not working, where we left people behind, and then start to make some changes in our system that helps everybody a little bit.
You recently wrote a CNN Business opinion piece with Melody Hobson about the disparity when it comes to income for Black Americans. I mean, the numbers from the Federal Reserve are stunning and frightening that it continues like that. And the headline of your piece, Black Americans are still worse off financially. Has the American economy been fundamentally racist?
I think you can say yes or no, but I think it's been fundamentally anti-poor. So that, if you live in certain parts of town, whether you're white or Hispanic or Black, you can pretty much be left behind. So I think minorities have been hurt more by the flaws we just mentioned than other people, the inner city schools, et cetera. So, is that deliberate? Maybe not. But we got to focus on it and fix it. I mean, and that's one of many issues we have that we need to focus on and fix.
Yeah. we'll talk about education in just one moment, but before I do, opioids. I was struck hearing Fed Chair Jerome Powell a few weeks ago on 60 Minutes bring up the opioid crisis. And he said that essentially, even with this booming economy and low unemployment, that we're essentially losing a generation, especially of young men, because of the opioid crisis.
He's right. So 70,000 people die, I think 25,000 out of fentanyl. It's an absolute, utter disaster. It's an emergency. It's more than died in Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan like every year. And remember, it's not just that. If you look at the workforce participation, take men here in this case, 17 to 24, it's still a couple of percentage points below what it would be in a recovery. It dropped dramatically. So it's not just the people dying, it's the people unable to work because they're addicted. It's the lack of programs to get people off of it. And it often afflicts the same parts of the town. We have a national emergency. The government is actually ringing this alarm bell now, but we got to learn to be a little more responsive when these things happen about how to go about it and fix it. And so labor force participation is going up. This may be holding it back. I'll give you another number, just I find shocking, and I learned this from General Ordiano. 17 to 24% of kids 70% of kids 17 to 24 are not eligible for military service, mostly health issues, obesity, diabetes, or they can't read or write. I mean, is that what we're doing to our kids? We're failing at the basic level, and of course a lot of that might be inner cities again. So we need to be ringing the alarm bell and then come up with policies that actually work.
You've been ringing the alarm bell for a long time on education and the state of public education for our kids in this country for years. I mean, 3 years ago when we sat down in Detroit, you were saying the same thing. You've said, and I quote, "We have a national emergency in inner city schools. The president has declared a national emergency at the southern border." What's a more pressing national emergency?
Well, the administration is actually doing a lot on skills and stuff like that too. And so I'm going to focus on the education part. It needs to be fixed. It just needs to be fixed. It's not going to be fair. It's not going to be right. And so we spend a lot of time on that. But you mentioned that we announced some of this in Detroit when you were there. One of the things we've learned is that the local efforts work. When a mayor, a governor, a community organization that teaches kids, the local businesses get involved and say, I will help train the teachers. If the kids get properly certified, I will give them a job. That's where it works. Federal programs are much more complicated to be effective when you get to the local ground. So but we're learning a lot of lessons of how you go about making this more effective.
But on the federal level, I mean, if billions of dollars can be allocated through a national emergency to a wall at the southern border, should billions of dollars be allocated toward our public schools?
I wouldn't consider either or. Those are not the choices
right.
we have as a society.
In addition.
I think money should be allocated, but my view is it probably should go at the local level.
Why?
A federal program, they don't tend to work. We just had Governor Gina Raimondo here, and we're talking about, that she in Providence they have electric boat that needs welders. She went to the local community college, I think, and said we need welding. So you got the electric boat officers to come in and train the kids and hire the kids. That works. You can't have a welding program in Providence that's established by the federal government. So we've learned a lot of lessons about it, and we learned that people like JPMorgan, bureaucracies are pretty powerful. They learn to start to exist for themselves and not for why you actually there, and that's getting the kid a job out of high school or community college.
Let's talk about the state of the economy. How confident are you right now that this, bull run can continue to, if it's 3 more months here, we're going to be at a record?
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
It looks pretty good. If you look at the underlying data, we're still growing at 2% plus. Consumer confidence is still quite high, and business confidence. Capital expenditures are still going up in spite of what you read about. Household formation is slow. People coming back to the workforce. So there's nothing in the numbers that you have to have a problem. Of course, you and I can make a long list of these problems, which may disrupt this one day, and that may be 2020, 2021, 2022, and it may not be one thing. It may just be a confluence of factors and events that, the proverbial straw in the camel's back. That, looking back, that's what did it.
So what is that thing that keeps you up at night on that front?
First of all, I think for the country, cyber is a critical issue, not economically, this is at the forefront, but I think just bad policy we don't fix. If you ask me that what's going to hurt our country in the long run is I take infrastructure. We put a man on the moon in 8 years after President Kennedy said, let's put a man on the moon. Now I'm told on average to rebuild a broken bridge, it takes 10 years to get the permits. When I go to China, they say it takes 2 years. The China and the Americans are besotted with bureaucracy. What happened to the good old American can do?
But is that going to drive us into a recession? I mean, what's your
I said it could be a confluence of events.
Okay,
There
so
may
it
not be
adds.
one thing. Traditional recessions are driven by fiscal tightening, monetary tightening, huge imbalance around the world, very rarely by geopolitics. Consumer confidence is a secret sauce, so things that hurt confidence. I put trade. We all want to resolve trade. There are serious issues around trade. We want the issues seriously looked at and resolved. On the other hand, a trade, I look at, we've had trade skirmishes, but a trade war, every time you see that it might end up badly, you see the effect in the marketplace. So a trade war wouldn't be a good thing, and I do believe that both the U.S. administration and China are trying to get to a proper deal.
You called it the most important geopolitical relationship, the U.S. and China, that we're going to see for the next
in general, not just trade, but
100 years.
Yeah.
Trade's obviously a big part of that. What does it mean if we do not see a comprehensive trade deal in the next few months?
Well, in the long run, America will be fine. Americans don't completely appreciate China. They've done a great job lifting up their people, but they have 400 million people in poverty. Their GDP per person is $10,000. They don't have our universities, our institution, our innovation, our rule of law. They've got enormous corruption, far beyond what you would see in most countries around the world. And they're surrounded by very complex neighbors. So it isn't like they have a free ride for the next 20 or 30 years.
But tariffs have been a big issue.
That's an economic issue. That will change that and maybe change geopolitics over time. So, but we'd prefer to see a negotiation that leads to a proper trade deal. Tariffs themselves, that they're put in place, they increase the odds that you have a trade war. That's all. And I think if you had tariffs, you would see reactions in the marketplace, which is not what either side wants. China has their own economic issues now.
Sure.
They would like to resolve these things. I think the other thing you should understand is Japan and Europe are fully behind the United States in this. These are not issues just for America. These are issues for everybody. What's fair trade? What's fair bilateral investment rights? What's stealing of state-owned enterprises? Industrial IP. What's these unfair subsidies of state-owned enterprise, whether it's dominating markets or subsidies, et cetera, and they need to be resolved.
So we heard last week from former White House economic advisor Gary Cohn, who said pretty bluntly, tariffs, quote, don't work. And he pointed to the numbers we saw that stunned me. You've got an $891 billion trade deficit, $419 billion deficit in goods, both records after the president said, I can solve this. Is Gary Cohn right? They don't work?
I like Gary. Let me say, I agree with him. They don't work technically because they cause all these various things.
Yeah.
But if the president were here, he'd say, they worked, I got them to the table, and no one else did.
So is the president right?
So as a negotiating strategy, it might have worked, yes.
Okay. When you look at the outlying risks to the U.S. economy, one number I keep looking at is auto loans and the fact that a record 7 million Americans are 90 plus days behind on those payments. And those are things you pay off sort of right away, your mortgage, your rent, your car loan. I'm wondering why you think that is, if it concerns you, and is JPMorgan steering clear of auto debt?
No, the American consumer is in good shape. Wages are going up. They're particularly going up the low end now.
So what's up with
that? But mortgages are $10 trillion, and they are pretty pristine, other than some of the stuff the government does. Auto lending is $1.3 trillion, of which $300 billion is subprime. It's not a systemic issue. Student lending is like $1.3 trillion or $4 trillion. It's all government. There's an issue there, but taxpayer will pay. It won't be businesses. So it's just not that big a systemic. But I think some companies did too much subprime, and they extended leases to like 84 months and things like that. And people are cutting back on it a little bit. We do very little of that, so it's not going to affect JPMorgan. I don't think it's going to take down any major company or anything.
Big tech.
But so the consumer's in very good shape.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Companies are in good shape.
Is anything in bad shape?
Yeah, the government debt's around the world a little bit high, but that's they can handle government debt very differently. Companies can handle debt. So, and I think, trade, shutdowns, if you ever have a debt ceiling crisis, there's a growing amount of geopolitical issues out there that can go south. So there are these things that you got to look out there and say, there are potential storms out there. It doesn't mean you're going to have a crack up, but you got to watch them.
What about big tech? Because you've been vocal about GDPR in Europe. You called it a good thing. You talked recently at AEI about Silicon Valley and having a big issue here. Senator Elizabeth Warren wants to break up the big tech firms in Silicon Valley. Is that what they need?
So the three issues. So one is consumer privacy and the principle that you should know what people have on you and you should be able to correct it or delete it. I generally agree with that. Very complex to do. We're already doing with our customers here. And so this is a law that needs to be written. It probably needs to be global because look, where's the data and whose data and your data is in computers around the world. So it's complex. The second is the democracy. we need to do something to protect the United States from all these bad actors using advertising money or robots on the web or Twitters. We've got to do more to protect the thing. I think some of these big tech companies are starting to really focus on that it's just unacceptable. The third is competition. And on that one, you got to look at competition. Are people doing things, and I'm talking about any particular one, that are unfairly stopping people from competing with them? And this has been going on my whole life about, it's like the company town store. Okay, it's great, we're going to pay you good wages, but you have to shop and buy your milk over here. Is that fair? And so I believe in fair competition. I think people should be very specific where they think there is no competition.
Where is there no competition, Jamie?
No, I don't. That's my point.
In the tech sector, do you
think?
I'm
not. I'm saying I don't know.
Okay.
But using your own platform to knock out other people would be bad.
Right.
But using your platforms to offer great things to American customers is not bad. And so you just have to be careful about which way you go on how you manage that process. And my view is the fintech, all the folks are starting to pay a lot of attention to that. This is a global issue. It may very well be a global trade issue, how you resolve some of these matters.
Let's talk about corporate taxes. You were a cheerleader for the corporate tax cuts that we saw, arguing about competitiveness. What we've also seen in the year since is that stock buybacks, announcements of them spiked 71% last year, a record just over $1 trillion. And government statistics show that business investment increased by 7%. During that time. Bank of America called it the investment boom that wasn't. And I know you're a strong defender of stock buybacks, but are you at all concerned that they deepen income inequality?
Not at all. I think, first of all, you have to look at this over a period of time. America had a 40% federal and state rate, stayed there for the last 20 years. The rest of the world came down to 15 to 25. This drove trillions of dollars of capital, brains, companies overseas. That was a huge economic error. My view is a sine qua non. You want a competitive environment, competitive global taxes on the business side. No one expected that tomorrow would create capital expenditures go up, et cetera. So that's number one. And capital expenditures are up. And if you actually look at the companies doing buyback, they're up even more there than anywhere else. Corporate R&D, corporate expenditures, a percentage of GDP is higher today than the so-called wonderful period of the 50s and 60s. So that's just not accurate. Number two, it's cumulative effect, how it takes place over time. But it's, part of capital is the redeployment of capital. If I can't use it, I give it back to my shareholder. Okay, now I'm not saying
but you've even said you want to use more of it, that you don't
and we
like
have.
having
And so
to
after
buy.
tax reform, we announced 400 new branches. We raised minimum wages to $18. We started doing more marketing. We started doing some more LMI. And a lot of companies, I think like 30 or 40% of the companies actually announced whole new programs,
but
new
I
plans.
Think the point is not all the companies are doing what you're doing.
The point is you can't look at this year over year. And redeploying capital is a good thing. So people act like if you buy back all the stock that it disappeared. It did not disappear. It went to other hands who does other things, presumably what they want. You might buy a car. Another company might do more R&D. They might do more venture capital. It's the proper redeployment of capital in the country, puts its highest and best use. And keep in mind, in the country. Does it immediately have an effect the one you want? No, because companies aren't going to build a new plant because Yahoo, they got to keep more cash. Okay, but they will eventually spend more money as consumers have more money and things like that. So I think people have to think very clearly about what policy is good for America. And otherwise, we'll do a lot of things like we've done in education, we've done in infrastructure, we did it in business taxation, which is a bad idea.
Let's talk some more about those policies. On the personal income tax side, you've said many times you're willing to pay more in taxes. You've said we should have a progressive tax system.
Well, we do have a progressive tax system.
And the focus should be on helping people at the lower end. Do you support a 70% marginal tax rate on the wealthiest Americans?
So I got involved in the business side, not on the corporate side, and on the individual side. On the individual side, everyone had their own personal thoughts. But for example, the government did the right thing to eliminate SALT, state and local tax deductions. Like, I don't think the American public realizes that benefit went to 5 states, including California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and 80% of the benefit to making over $500,000 a year. That was the right thing to do, and yet everyone's yelling and screaming about it. They did the right thing. On the high tax rate, I think what I've said before is I understand that we have to fix all these other things that might cost money. But I think if you were a Democrat or a Republican, that you should justify what you're doing. No one believes that just sending more money to Washington is going to fix some of the broken problems we've had. So, to me, you got to link the two. If we're going to tax people more, we should justify what it is. And we have a progressive tax system, but Warren Buffett and others have pointed out it's not progressive in every little thing. And certain things we do are quite regressive, like gas taxes. So, we should do the right thing, but I think the government's got to justify how it spends money better.
I think the fundamental question there is you have Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez saying 70% marginal taxes on the $10 million and above, or you have Elizabeth Warren, who's running for president, saying a wealth tax on all of your assets over $50 million. They're fundamentally trying to address the inequality issue. And I mean, do you think they're misguided, both of them, on that front? Is that not the way to do it?
I think if you look at policy, you and I would say we need infrastructure, we need education, we need to reform a whole bunch of different stuff. And just taxing more people is not necessarily going to do that. So I agree about helping the lower end. I've already said I agree on like doing a lot more for the earned income tax credit. Yeah. Like, I agreed to spend a lot more in education, a lot more in, and I would do that as a sine qua non. I wouldn't spend that much time saying we shouldn't be doing it. But all my wealthier friends are going to say, well, that's just money going to Washington. It'll be wasted. They won't actually use it for that. They'll use it to pay off their own special interest groups and friends of this thing or that. So they have to be linked. You can't separate taxation from is it effectively done. People have done studies on a lot of the programs we've done, and trillions of dollars down the sink. They didn't work. Our government is unable to look at a program and stop it when it doesn't work, because all of a sudden interest groups, special interest groups say it's good for them. It may not be good for why we did it.
Well, I mean, this gets to what you wrote in your shareholder letter last year. And I read it. How long does it take you to write that thing, by the way?
It takes quite a bit. I'm getting near the end of this year. So
yeah, it does.
I care about these issues, and I think
course.
it's important that people get involved and help try to fix the problems.
Because you wrote in it, this line struck me: the need for solutions, through collaborative and competent government. Is our government competent right now?
I think
as a whole,
the most competent and capable we see is certain mayors and certain governors at a local level. So if you actually go around the country, there are places that are doing great, and local mayors, local governors working with community organizations. There could be schools, there could be people who train people, working with business, working together to fix that city. It works.
So not Washington.
Our federal government, if you look at it over time, has gotten more and more ineffective. And you can go through a million reasons. I'm not an expert on why that is. But someone even told me we haven't done a budget like properly. I think they got fine going on now. For the better part of the last 20 years, we've barely done budgets. Do you know what it's like for a company if you didn't have planning? I'm not saying you have to stick to the budget. Someone in the military told me that not doing a budget cost them a big part of their money because of stop-start. And I also say the most important thing to fixing the problem is recognizing the problem. And I don't personally care whether someone's a Democrat or Republican. Everyone involved in inner city schools would say it doesn't work.
So you yourself have said that your heart is a Democrat, but your brain is more Republican right now. What do you make of the direction the Democratic Party is going in as a whole right now?
Yeah, I would give it time to sort out. Someone wrote an article in the paper about all the churning on the Democrat side with the front runners and all that, and all the Sturm and Drang, and let it sort out. There's a lot of people running. Some are qualified. Some are completely inexperienced, by the way, which I find shocking that they would consider themselves qualified. I'm not going to give you their names.
You guessed my follow-up question.
But let it sort out, and let them figure it out. And
I'm not even asking about the contenders, actually, but just the direction of the party. Here's one. I'm sure you saw this Gallup poll a few months ago. That the Democrats as a whole now in America now have a more positive view of socialism than capitalism. A question like that, or Governor Hickenlooper, who's running, who would not say he's a capitalist when asked 3 times if he's a capitalist.
These are slogans. So traditionally, socialism is where the government owns the means of production, companies. Now, I don't think even the Democrats want that. I think what some people mean when they say socialism is social democracy.
There's a Democratic socialist running for president.
Right, but the social democrat mean stronger welfare nets and training programs, sharing the wealth a little bit more. I think those are fundamentally different things. But even the people who are saying socialists, I don't think they mean just give the government more and more to do. Because a lot of Democrats I know, they want a more equitable society. They wouldn't say that's the solution.
So you're not concerned about?
No, I'm concerned about bad policy. Okay. Well, let it sort it out. A lot of these folks have to describe what they mean more. You're not going to get away with just saying socialism. You have to say what that means. How are you going to effectuate it? How is it good for the average American?
What's not good for the average American, but I don't know if either party cares about it at all right now, is the national debt. I mean, the fact that we're sitting here staring at $22 trillion in national debt that we can deal with in the near term, but I think about my kids or your grandkids. Jerome Powell said we're on an unsustainable path. How freaked out or not are you by that?
I'm not of the MMT group.
Okay.
And I think it is huge. So it's 80% of GDP. Okay, so just the American public should know, Japan is 250% of GDP.
Yeah, but we don't want to get to their
No,
position,
of course,
right?
but I'm saying it's sustainable today, but it does have this hockey stick effect. Again, facts are facts. Most of that is from entitled programs.
Yeah.
And so I think the earlier you deal with it, the better, but you don't have to panic over
But
it.
like, who's going to deal with it?
Most Americans
If Republicans aren't going to deal with it, and they, you know.
I'm saying you have time. I'm simply saying you don't have to like burn your hair out and say it's got to be dealt with tomorrow. You have time, but what you don't want to do is be somewhere that hockey stick where it deals with itself. You know, like, and I don't think we're even remotely close, but we need rational people. So if you and I were running a company, you'd get people in a room like this, you get all the facts, you study, you come with a game plan. We need to do that, but again, if it doesn't happen in the next couple of years, it's not going to be a disaster. And as long as it's owed to yourself, which most of it is, so you're going to say the debt's $7 trillion outside. That's true. America owns $7 trillion of foreign assets. The economy's worth over $100 trillion, so it's not that big a deal. But as long as it's owed to yourself, it's intergenerational.
The Green New Deal, Larry Kudlow, the president's chief economic advisor a few weeks ago, said it will literally destroy the economy. Is he right?
Again, I don't know what it means, a Green New Deal. I mean,
well, it's guaranteed jobs. It's getting rid of, you know, CO2 emissions essentially in the next decade.
Again, I don't spend much time worrying about things that I can't effectuate. Can you focus on climate change in an intelligent way that doesn't damage the economy? Yes, you can. It's called CO2 emission taxes or trading. There are a couple ways to do it. So you better do it wisely because you could hurt the economy, which hurts everybody. So I'm saying it's legitimate to focus on climate change. You know, simple policies that are slogans, that will have adverse consequences.
I have to wrap up in just a few minutes. I have a few more quick questions for you. One is on Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure if you saw the piece in the Times this morning on Mohammed bin Salman and what has happened in the wake of Jamal Khashoggi's murder, the journalist. But you pulled out of the conference in Riyadh in the wake of that. And I'm just wondering what your position on it and what JPMorgan's position on dealing with Saudi Arabia is now. Yeah,
so one of the complex things we have to deal with is we do business in 100 countries. And obviously actions like that, no America would ever condone. But we're in these countries not to bank one person or one leadership. We're there to be there in perpetuity for their people. And so we're very careful about what you mean by pulling out. So the Saudis I know are high quality. They're decent. They want to change their society. They're top-notch professionals. You look at some of the institutions and et cetera. So we're there for them. And so the pulling out was more about being clear. We're not condoning something. So it's a complex issue. I understand the subjects on every side in this one.
All right, finally, Amazon. Threat or opportunity for JPMorgan?
It's both. You know, look, running this company, I tell our own employees, they're all coming. Whether it's Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google, Tencent, WeChat, Alipay, they're all coming. And it may be a fintech that you know about. It may be an existing company that just comes up with a better, braver idea. That's how we operate. So we'll partner with people. We'll compete with people. Fine, either way, we just got to find a way that makes sense for us too. And we're completely willing to disrupt ourselves. Like, you know, we came out with the app to buy and sell stocks for free.
Yep.
You know, and we're coming out soon with Robo. And it's, you know, may not be as good as some of the ones out there, but it'll be really good. And we haven't decided a price yet, but we're going to be quite competitive.
I thought it was interesting you assembled the team in 2017 to just think about one question, and that is, how should we think about Amazon? What did that team decide?
It was Amazon and everybody else.
Okay.
And we also sent people to China to look at Ping An and WeChat and Tencent, and they came back, and we study it, so a lot of detail. They came back appropriately scared and energized. Both are true.
Scared and energized.
So I'm comfortable to do fire as a company, but you know, I'll probably be sitting here in 5 years and someone did much better than we did somewhere. And that's called capitalism. I'm not against that. That is what it is. You better keep running all the time, otherwise you'll lose somewhere.
Does Amazon want to be a bank, do you think?
I don't know. You have to ask them.
And finally, Jeff Bezos. He tried to hire you. He wanted to hire you. Clearly, you didn't go work there. What do you make of him as a leader?
I thought the world of him back then, too. I think the world of Jeff Bezos. And I think he's smart and dedicated and devoted, and he's got a lot of very good people around him, and he's obviously one of the most creative businessmen of probably the last 100 years. And so he's always come with ideas, and we watch them closely, including if he comes our way. But he's a friend, and I think the world of him.
Jamie Dimon, I appreciate the time. I will leave here feeling a little more secure about the state of the U.S. economy. And good luck in this initiative. I think it's going to mean a lot for people.